Hi everyone, Lauren here again. I'm going to go over Chapter 10 in Johnson's book, Radical Behaviorism for ABA Practitioners. Again, I do have my notes in front of me, so if I happen to look down, I apologize. I'll try to look at the camera as much as possible. And I hope I grasp the concept of this chapter, but here we go. Chapter 10 is called Radical Behaviorism. The chapter starts off with a story about a girl named Lynn, who just received her master's degree in applied behavioral analysis. She passed her BCBA exam and received a job position working for an agency that helps serve disabled children. It has its own school, residential program, contracts with families, etc. Starting this new job gave Lynn multiple feelings. Some days she was confident, and others she was worried that she was not prepared enough. I mean, I feel like we all are in that aspect for a job, so that's kind of normal. Johnson mentions an incident between Lynn and her boss, Penny. Penny talks to Lynn and tries to encourage her to do additional reading and training and other things to help better prepare how she talks about a child's behavior in terms of radical behaviorism, or even talks to a child. Lynn realizes she has a lot to learn still, since her program did not go into radical behaviorism in depth, and it just barely graced it, and that her boss is just there to help guide her in the correct direction instead of just criticizing her. So that's how it starts off. Johnson then begins to talk about the philosophy of the science of behavioral analysis. He goes into covering key features of radical behaviorism. It is first mentioned that radical behaviorism is not a study of behavior, but instead is a complete and comprehensive philosophy, including a variety of including a variety of findings, issues, scientific activities, etc. Scientists might not think that their actions and behavior makes a big impact on a daily basis. However, added up over time, it impacts the scientific philosophy immensely. Verbal behavior is important when it comes to radical behaviorism. In this chapter, Johnson talks about the laws of operant learning being used to explain verbal behavior. He also mentions that the basis for the radical behaviorism philosophy is the science of behavior analysis, which to continue, it is the foundation for this science. Sorry, got a little tongue-tied. So essentially that means that how we understand behavior and how it works is how we are guided through the philosophy of radical behaviorism. Johnson then mentions a statement from Skinner about behavior. This is going to be a direct quote, but Skinner said that in terms of studying behavior, it is, quote unquote, as a subject matter in its own right apart from internal explanations, mental or physiological. According to Johnston, this refers to the past experiences and history data of when behavior was studied solely as a way to find out how the mind works. This statement from Skinner ignores the mental aspect entirely, which supposedly emphasizes that it does not have a physical form, or physical foundation, excuse me. Johnston mentions in his book why radical behaviorism is indeed radical. If you look up the definition of radical, there's words of extreme, I think it mentions in the book, other words. You don't think of radical, you think of radical as extreme or something like that in terms of behaviorism. Well, in this case, it's very thorough. It's because it is very thorough and comprehensive than other behaviorisms, because it is successful in addressing all main points and features of behavior in nature. This leads us into the next key feature of radical behaviorism. The next key feature of radical behaviorism is the historical context of it and how it compares and contrasts to other behaviorism forms along with its origins. The interest of scientific behavior dates back all the way to the 19th century. These initial interests in scientific behavior were mentalistic indeed. Over the years, scientists struggled with how to pursue their thoughts. Eventually, these struggles brought forth a more in-depth focus on behavior instead of mentalism. Johnson did mention Watson's term of classical behaviorism as being a huge progression for scientists. The next part of the chapter talks about radical behaviorism compared to methodological behaviorism. Big word. Methodological behaviorism is described by Johnson directly in the book as a way of thinking about scientific method that comes from conventional experimental practices and their underlying rationale. He then includes a summarization by Moore of the methods of methodological behaviorism. Basically, to sum them up, all these, so the summarization, they show that mentalism is widely involved in those methods. Another good point that Johnson makes is in the section labeled a matter of opinion. This part of the chapter includes how a good behavior analyst will need to ask experimental and scientific questions with their research and studies and apply scientific methods to back their findings. Johnston mentions that radical behaviorism is used as a way to create better science instead of just arguing facts. Radical behaviorism for scientists brings forth the effectiveness and quality of the scientific study of behavior. Johnston mentions that if other ABA practitioners who are well trained and or experienced are not successful or effective in their work and provide, that if other ABA practitioners who are well trained and are experienced, if they're not successful or effective in their work and providing services, then this could be happening for a number of reasoning. Excuse me, I'm getting tongue-tied now. Sorry about that. One reasoning could be that their understanding is not strong enough, going down the incorrect path, maybe still needs to be perfected, and there's multiple reasonings why. We could think we are the most trained ABA practitioner there is, however, there is always something new to learn. Johnston encourages those to continue learning and researching. Radical behaviorism is not the only answer to prove whether something is true or false. It is an approach to study and report about behavior that has the least long-term issues with other approaches and methods, however. Lastly, Johnston mentions in this particular section of the book that if you are not comfortable with radical behaviorism and are so adamant about other approaches or methods, he does encourage you to present your findings and cases along with being willing to defend your position if they are questioned or if you are questioned. The last section of the book before summary and study questions is called Selling Radical Behaviorism. It goes over the rationales of radical behaviorism and how we should be willing to accept them. He says that we should not feel forced or that we should not feel forced or should not feel like he is trying to convince us that radical behaviorism is an important aspect or is the only important aspect, but instead we should have found that out on our own. We should just see it naturally in our studies or what we're reading instead of trying to force it in there. We should be able to see that radical behaviorism is like a puzzle. That's an example that Johnston does give in the book. Every piece fits in a puzzle. You're not going to have leftover pieces, and as you put the pieces on the table, you see the picture more and more clear. You know where certain pieces fit and go from there as you're going on. So like I mentioned in my notes, it's like a puzzle where every piece fits and we see the end results clearer as we place each piece. Radical behaviorism will not leave us leftover pieces or useless pieces like other approaches would do, such as mentalism. I believe he goes into farther explanation about mentalism, where you're wondering what someone might do if this happens, or if this happens, or if this happens. It's just radical behaviorism does not leave you with a bunch of pieces that you don't need. It's going to have everything fit in there. So that's pretty much the gist of the chapter. There were a couple boxes, 10.1, 10.2, and I think even a 10.3 that went over examples of each section. But my question to leave for you today, and I hope this kind of makes sense, is give an instance when you used mentalism that you can remember, and how you might be able to change your thoughts and behavior in that particular situation to more radical behaviorism instead. Hopefully that makes sense. It made sense in my head, so I'm hoping it makes sense in your guys' head, and then I'll answer mine below. But also let me know any additional thoughts you might have during the chapter. Maybe I didn't go over it or remember to go over it, but if you have any additional thoughts that you thought were interesting during the chapter, feel free to put them in the discussion so that way we can elaborate on it some more and have a very good discussion for this last week of the semester. I also lastly want to thank you for watching my video. I know I'm one of the last ones for the week, so I think we did good this whole entire course, and I look forward to hopefully being in the next course with a lot of you guys. So yeah, leave your discussions below and we'll get a good discussion going on. Thank you again. Bye guys.